Good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute privilege and an honour to be back here in Freshford again. My colleague, Councillor Michael McCarthy, my colleague, Councillor Mary Hilda Kavanagh. But before I do so, this is my second time to be here in the last 24 hours. But again, for the launch of the Féile earlier last night, and it was lovely to witness Mary, and just to keep you all informed, Mary's a true, I suppose, daughter of Freshford, and in true style, she turned down the offer to be in Ballina last night with Joe Biden, to be here last night and here this afternoon. So I think we'd give Mary a very, very warm round of applause.
Very much, Councillor Fitzpatrick, for your kind words about our works and our endeavours here, and for your support. Now I'm pleased to invite Ms Siobhán Doyle to take the podium. Siobhán is from County Wexford and works in the National Museum. Her book, A History of the GAA in 100 Objects, was nominated for Sports Book of the Year in the 2022 Unpost Irish Book Awards. So we look forward to hearing about some of the artefacts which caught our attention. Please welcome Siobhán.
Thank you very much, Ned, and thanks everyone for coming, and to Maria and the committee for the invitation. It's my first time to Freshford, and I'm glad to see such a lovely, vibrant community. I'm only sorry that I'm a week too early for the Fleadh. I can't come next week because I'm busy. I'll be in Salt Hill shouting for Wexford against Galway. But Wexford have the Fleadh in 2024, so we're very much looking forward to that. So the last time the Fleadh was in Wexford, I won an All-Ireland medal in the under 12 Céilí band competition. So I have a lot of work to do between this year and next year. So this is my book. This is my lockdown project. Started working on it in 2020. At the time I was working in the GAA Museum, and I was working on the centenary programme to commemorate Bloody Sunday. It doesn't strike you as a GAA object, but the whole idea is that when we dig deeper and when we uncover the layers, there are many stories to tell. So these are a pair of glasses that belong to a woman called Annie Burke. She was from County Sligo, and she went to a match on the 21st November 1920, a day that became known as Bloody Sunday. So Dublin were playing Tipperary in a challenge football match, and they're the top two teams in the country at the time. It was on in Croke Park, and it was during the War of Independence, so Britain and Ireland were at war over who was controlling the country. And a few minutes into that match, British soldiers opened fire and they entered Croke Park, and 14 people lost their lives that day. And when I was working on the commemorative programme with the GAA, I would have been a bit critical of the GAA's commemoration of Bloody Sunday throughout the years, because in a lot of ways they put a lot of emphasis on one victim, on Michael Hogan. The Hogan stand is named after him in Croke Park, and almost any time that you read something about Bloody Sunday, it's Michael Hogan and 13 others. So there was a lot of work done to, I suppose, rehabilitate the memory of the other victims. And so I hope that the centenary, that we did our work in that way. But what struck me is that with events like that, we often measure it, we measure these tragedies in victims and in injuries. And we often don't think about the people that survive and have to live with the trauma of those days, of those moments. So Annie Burke was at the match. She was at the Bloody Sunday match, and she drifted across the field in Croke Park, and she draped her coat over Michael Hogan as he lay on the pitch after being shot. And she was wearing her glasses. They were damaged, and she never wore them again after that day. never had them repaired, never had them cleaned, put them in the case and put them away. And so almost 100 years later, her daughter donated them to the GAA Museum in Croke Park. And so these glasses, I think, are a really powerful part of history, because the eyes that saw the War of Independence are no longer with us, but we do have these objects, these artefacts, these material traces of those days. So these glasses were my starting point, and in many ways the glasses are kind of a metaphor for that time in Irish history, you know, that even though we're damaged and bruised, we're still here to tell the tale, and like these glasses, we all have a bit of resilience in us. So my research brought me, as I said, to the 32 counties of Ireland, and one thing that I was quite surprised by was that there is a phenomenal community of private collectors, of GAA enthusiasts that collect their own, that, you know, create their own kind of museums of a lot of match programs, of posters, of jerseys, and this is Jim Whelan in Great Namana. He has a room at the back of his house with his collection, and there's at least one of those collectors in every county across Ireland, and they're doing collecting and memory work that no museum is doing, and they are a really important part of the GAA's history. And I know that Jim has lots of journalists and historians ringing him, can you check this match programme and tell me who was playing corner forward that day and all that kind of thing. So phenomenal repository of objects that can't be found elsewhere, and it's people like Jim that made the stories in the book all the richer. So I'll take you on a whirlwind tour of some of the objects within the book. And even though the GAA was established on the 1st November in 1884 in his hotel in Thurles, we have evidence of our games being played long before that, and this is one of the objects that is evidence of that. It's a hair hurling ball. This is one from, I think this one's from County Kerry, and it's made of horsehair. So this dates back to the 15th century. You know, you had to work with what you had. So we're used to now seeing the leather slitters and rubber and different materials and colours changing all the time. But this is a phenomenal piece of historical evidence of hurling being played, and there's lots of them have been found in the last maybe 20 or 30 years, mostly in bogland areas, because the condition of the soil maintains the amazing condition that some of these hair hurling balls are in. Many of them are in the care of the National Museum of Ireland. So this is one of the earliest rule books, and GAA rules are always evolving and changing along with our games. And in the GAA's early years, they found it really difficult to make sure that everyone was playing off the same rules. Because before the GAA was established, it was mostly local teams, and then when teams started playing others from further afield, it was difficult for teams to agree on whose rules to play. So this is one of the earliest rule books from 1888. There were 13 rules in it, and the rules are a little bit different than what we're used to today. So today there are 70 minutes in a GAA match. In 1888 there was 120 minutes, so the matches were 2 hours long. There's 15 players on a team today. In 1888 there was 21 players, so 42 players on the pitch at the same time. There was also a rule that any 2 players could have a fight, that they could kick, box, punch, poke, bite, wrestle, do whatever they liked. That was fine, that was grand. If a third player got involved, third player got a straight red card. You could argue it still happens, but those were the rules in 1888. Inevitably, there's going to be lots of trophies and medals within the 100 stories, and the book would have been written a long time ago if I'd have just stuck with medals and jerseys and trophies. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and perhaps uncover some of the not as obvious objects, and this is one of them. The one on the left is a lovely trophy. As you can see, it's in really good condition. They're both from the same time frame. They're both donated to the GAA by Archbishop Thomas Croke. He was the first patron of the GAA. A very important person in the GAA's early days, because he used his position within the Catholic Church to promote the games, and from the pulpit he used to encourage people to play GAA. And in the 1890s he donated these trophies, one for the hurling and one for the football. So the one on the left was, up until a couple of years ago, it was awarded to the winners of the Alliance Hurling League. It was retired a couple of years ago. And the one on the right is the football trophy, which is not as in good condition, because up until a couple of years ago it had been used as a flower pot. So it got lost along the way, and until a man called Tony Honan, who is an antiques dealer in Ennis in County Clare, he came upon the flower pot. Its owner didn't realise the historical significance of it, so he rescued it, and it's now in his care in his antique shop on the main street in Ennis. So, and Tony will put the trophy in the window if there's a big match on in Cusack Park. So I suppose, you know, there's lots of stories to tell, but there's not always objects to represent them as well. And so that was always something that I was conscious of too. That, you know, I was led by the objects. When I started out, I had a list of about 10 objects, and then after that it was just whatever I could find. My only criteria was that every code was to be represented and every county was to be represented. So after that it was fair game. This is a wonderful story to do with my own county, Wexford. The Wexford footballers were the first team to win 4 All-Ireland finals in a row from 1915 to 1918. And there was a man on that team called Ionad Doyle. He was from New Ross, and he was a very devout man. And in 1968 he donated his All-Ireland medals to the Augustinians in New Ross, who went to Mass, 10 o'clock Mass in good counsel every day. So they decided to commemorate him and commemorate his medals by embedding them into the base of their best gold chalice. So that's now in the Augustinian Archives in Dublin. And while I was doing the research, I was also told that Christy Ring did something similar with his 8th All-Ireland medal. So Christy was a very devout man too. He went to Mass as well with the Augustinians in Washington Street in Cork City every day. And he donated his 8th All-Ireland medal to them, but they melted it down and put it into a chalice. So it's no longer in existence. Well, it is, but just not in medal form, which is a bit of a shame, but it's still there, and the chalice can still be viewed in the archives. This is a wonderful object. Rounders, of course, is one of the games under the remit of the GAA, and this object is a wonderful example of, I suppose, recycling, because this rounder's bat is made from a table leg. So it was used by a woman called Sheila Humphreys. She was a political activist during the Irish Revolution, and she was imprisoned in Kilmainham jail, and she was a very important person for the other women in Kilmainham. She was great at motivating them and organising dramas and plays and games. And Rounders was one of the games that was played quite a lot in prison, because you needed limited equipment and you could play it in a relatively small space. So again, you have to go with whatever materials that you have. So Sheila fashioned this rounder's bat from the leg of a chair. So another example of transforming one object into another and giving it a brand new meaning. This is, I suppose, one of the earliest headgear or head protection, and they're a pair of goggles worn by John Joe Doyle. He played for Newmarket on Fergus and for Clare. in the 1930s, and he wore glasses. But of course there was no helmets then, and in order to protect himself, he made these goggles himself out of bicycle spokes and bandages and an elastic band. So that's how John Joe came to have his beloved nickname of Goggles. This is said to be one of the earliest hurling helmets. I suppose it's kind of hard to believe that helmets only became compulsory in 2009, 2010. But this is a hurling helmet that was worn by a man called Micheál Murphy. He's from County Cork, he played for the UCC team, and he suffered a head injury himself. And he decided to take matters into his own hands, given that there were no hurling helmets at the time. So this is a motorcycle helmet. And he wore it first in, I think it was 1966. He came on as a sub in the Cork County final. And so you can imagine the whispers that were going on in the stands with your man coming on with a helmet. But I suppose the conversation started then about protective headgear, and it's really only on the biggest stage in the All-Ireland hurling final that the conversation really started gaining ground, when Tommy Walsh, who played for Kilkenny, lost an eye when Kilkenny were playing Tipperary in an All-Ireland hurling final. And there was a big campaign, Tommy dedicated a lot of his time afterwards going around to schools and telling children about the importance of wearing protective headgear. This is, on paper, some of these objects look like not very exciting or not very important at all, but they do have very important stories to tell. So this is an All-Ireland hurling final ticket from 1939, and it's also known as the Thunder and Lightning final. So Cork were playing Kilkenny that day. This is a ticket to the Cusack stand, and it cost 5 shillings. It was played on the 3rd of September 1939, which was also the day that World War II broke out. So it was also, the match was played under a backdrop of violent thunderstorms. And it became known as the Thunder and Lightning final. Practically all of the second half was fought in a thunderstorm, accompanied by vivid flashes of lightning and a deluge of rain. Both Cork and Kilkenny asked for the match to be called off owing to the conditions, but the referee persevered, and Kilkenny won by last-minute points, which was scored by James Phelan. And he described how it rained so hard that the black and amber colours of my jersey ran into my togs. This is one of my favourite stories that I loved collecting, not just because it was in a pub, but the research brought me to Murray's Bar in Knockcrockery in County Roscommon. It's about 15 minutes from Athlone. And it's owned by the Murray family, and there's a man called Jimmy Murray who is an absolute legend within Roscommon football folklore. He is the first and only man to lift the Sam Maguire for Roscommon in 1943 and again in 1944. Jimmy and his family were quite prominent in the community of Knockcrockery at the time. At the time, Jimmy ran the local shop, the local hardware, the pub, and the undertakers. So safe to say everyone in the village knew him. And he loved people coming in to the pub. He died a couple of years ago, but he loved people coming into the pub, and he'd tell them all about his football stories. So Jimmy got the football from the 1943 All-Ireland final, and he got his teammates to sign the football, and he proudly hung it from a bootlace from the ceiling, and it was proudly displayed over the bar. But in 1990 the pub went on fire, and the lounge and the bar were pretty much gutted. And when the fire brigade were called that night, firemen went in. First fireman grabbed the football, threw it out the door, and carried on fighting the fire. So the object was very much on the fireman's radar. He appreciated the importance of it, and it survived fire, and it still proudly hangs above the bar. And I believe that there is a statue being erected of Jimmy in the village of Knockcrockery later on this year. Radiona Gaeltachta, and she was based in Ring in County Waterford. And you might know the name, but you definitely know the voice. She always signed off her match reports with Dorian Vicvercu on Schultz on Reen. And she used to go to matches on her Honda 50. She used to go to matches all over the country, and she'd ring in the results on whatever phone that she could find. She'd ring them into the radio then afterwards. But for a woman working in the media in the 1970s would have been relatively rare, but for a woman working in sports broadcasting it would have been even more unusual. So Doreen had to break down a lot of barriers, and she came upon many obstacles, one of them being in Semple Stadium when a steward, when she was going to the press area to do her reporting on the matches, and the steward in Semple Stadium told her, no ma'am, this is for the press. And she said, I am the press. But that happened to her a couple of times. So what she did was she made this unofficial press pass. So she got the Radiona Gaeltachta logo, got her name signed, and she would present that if anyone questioned. So thankfully, a woman broadcasting within sport and within GAA is a much more regular occurrence. So not as many obstacles as Doreen had to break down. Actually, she won a junior county title with Waterford in 1974, and she played on the team with her daughter while her granddaughter watched her from the sidelines. So some wonderful stories. I was using the objects as kind of springboards and starting points for telling lots of different tales. I really didn't know the story until I started the research. My first encounter with John 37 would be watching matches at home, and we'd all be fighting over who saw the John 37 sign first. And we always thought that it was something to do with, John Powers going 3 goals and 7 points or something, but it wasn't. John 37 was a man called Frank Hogan, who was from Borris O'Kane in County Tipperary, but he found love in Limerick and settled there, and he followed the Limerick hurling and footballers, and he'd go to many other matches as well. But Frank was a born-again Christian, and he was a very devout man, and he was watching the 1987 Wimbledon men's tournament that Pat Cash won, and when Pat Cash was being awarded the trophy on the court at Wimbledon, in the crowd he saw someone with a sign that said John 37. It was relating to a verse in the Bible, and he said, if someone can do that at tennis, I'm going to do that at GAA matches. Now on to the Kilkenny crowd. When I said at the start that the research started with my list of 10 objects, John 37 sign was one of those, and Cody's cap was another one. Because for me, who grew up in the 90s and 2000s, I can't remember a time when Brian Cody was a manager. He was a very obliging man, lovely, generous man. When I was speaking to him on the phone on a number of occasions during the research, and I was a little bit raging because Wexford had lost Kilkenny so many times under his management that I was hoping that he's a bit contrary, but he wasn't. And very open to the story being shared. And Cody is very rarely seen without his cap. It's switched for a woolly one during the winter time. Actually, one of the only times you'll see him without his baseball cap is during the national anthem. And I didn't realise until during the research that it's etiquette during the national anthem that not only do you take off your cap, but you also have to hold it in a way where the inside of it isn't seen, because that's considered to be bad etiquette if you can see the inside of the cap. So if you watch Cody carefully and go back over, which I did, go back over footage and photographs, he keeps to the etiquette every time. So he told me that his baseball cap or his woolly cap is like what helmets are to hurlers. You just have to wear them, it's part of match day. And this is another recent enough find as well of the Richard Dick Walsh statue in Mooncoin. And sorry, I'll have to go to my notes for this. There's GAA statues all over the country. There's Seamus Connolly created this one, and he's synonymous. He's nearly the go-to sculptor for GAA statues. So the Paddy O'Shea statue in Ventry in County Kerry, Mick Mackey statue in Castleconnell, Dermot Early statue in Roscommon, it's all from the same sculptor, Seamus. And Richard was the first player to captain a hurling team to 3 All-Ireland titles, so in 1907, 1909 and 1913. And 1913 was the first All-Ireland final where Kilkenny wore their now iconic black and amber stripes. And what's brilliant about this statue that many of you may have seen is that the hurl that's in his hands has been shaped from one of Richard's hurls that I believe was uncovered in a house not so long ago. So it's wonderful that there's very much a part of Richard within the trophy itself, or the statue itself, should I say.
Just want to say thanks to Siobhán for a really fascinating insight into the stories behind the items in her book. From the very first item, Annie Burke's glasses there, I really have to say I felt it a tingle down my back, goose pimples really, and interesting from my point of view to see John Doyle's Goggins-Styles glasses. I remember Dick at the church telling me that he was introduced to Goggins-Style on the pitch at the 1932 All-Ireland. Dick at the church is Dick from Tyrone, Dick Welsh. And spine tingling again to think of Jimmy Murray's football being saved at that night of the fire. So we've had a couple of great lectures here in the last few years, and you get it's wonderful to hear somebody speaking about something that they're so interested in. But I think today is the what's come across as the love that Siobhán has for all those artefacts and the stories behind them. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now I just want to, we have just one or two more functions. I am not going to go down through the programme for the festival because it's on the flyer, which you can take a copy of it with you. Please let people know that Féile Lachtain 2023 is up and running. But I will emphasise, and what Councillor Fitzpatrick said there about, he described what's going to happen on June 17th as one of the most important cultural events in County Kilkenny, not just in Freshford or North Kilkenny, but in County Kilkenny this year, and that is the day when the Shrine of St Lachtain's Arm will be coming here on loan, thanks to the authorities in the National Museum. It'll be here, we're not quite sure of the times yet, but most of the day it'll be here, and we hopefully that we'll have great interest shown in it that day. So again, thank you for your coming today and for your ongoing interest in Ionad Lachtain. So just one more task then. In a moment I'm going to call on Councillor Fitzpatrick to unveil a painting for us down at the back. And the painting is an artistic representation of Lachtain Nefa, which is the hymn composed by our late schoolmaster Tom Waldron in the 1980s, 1984 I think, in honour of our patron saint. And Larry has written the hymn in calligraphy, and I said Larry, I should have said the work is done by our good friend Larry Hamilton. Larry has written the hymn in calligraphy, and he's decorated it then with a flower motif. And of course Larry was a lifelong friend of the late Tom Waldron. I feel maybe I should apologise to him for asking him to do this late last year and putting pressure on him, because he had just at that time celebrated a significant birthday. And I don't want to give away his age now, but suffice to say that this is the second version of the hymn that Larry has done, and he did the first one hangs in Scollaghdine, and Larry did it about 10 years ago, after he had celebrated his 80th birthday. So as the Americans say, you do the maths, and we're extremely grateful, Larry. Míle buíochas that as ucht the héithir agus the courageous agus the Maratú an Céad.